Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to MetrObelisk Radio's Firefly Retrospective. Today, we are looking at the episode Safe. Now, this episode was written by Drew Z. Greenberg. As far as Firefly is concerned, this is the only episode that he wrote, but his other credits contain story editor for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, supervising writer and writer on Star Wars The Clone Wars, a writer on Warehouse 13, a writer on the CW's Arrow, and writer on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, this episode was directed by Michael Grossman. Now, as far as Firefly is concerned, same thing. This is the only episode that he's directed. Now, his credits for director include shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel, Star Trek Enterprise, Charmed, Grey's Anatomy, and where I personally know his name from, Nickelodeon's Zoe 101. Now, just a fun fact, this was the 7th episode to air on the Fox network during the show's initial release on Fox. Now, this episode continues with where the cattle job left off in the prior episode. Now, I still stand behind what I said with regards to Shindig in regards to it being a standalone episode. You don't have to watch Shindig to follow along with what's going on here. Now, this cuts back and forth between 11 years prior with the younger Simon and River to the present time in the episode, basically establishing backstory for how Simon got River out of the academy, and that's pretty much all that stuff. That's pretty much all that stuff is there for, and is peppered throughout the entirety of this episode. Now, the opening has a shootout where Shepard gets shot, and during this time, Simon and River are in town. Wash tries to find him after this, and that's when Simon gets taken. Then River tries to find him, and the Serenity crew just leaves because Shepard's really in need of a doctor in the here and now. Now, this leads to one of my criticisms up to this point. Why aren't Simon and River packing by this point in the series? They're both wanted fugitives by the Alliance, and people are either going to try to take them or kill them, whichever way the situation calls for. If both Simon and River were packing by this point, they could at least put up a fight if they need to, but they have to rely on Malcolm, Zoe, and Jane to get them out of tough spots each and every time. Now, I'm not saying that Simon and River packing would have helped them out in this situation by getting kidnapped, but logically, it would make sense that they would at least have a gun strapped to their hip. Then Simon and River get to the Christian village up in the hills, and this leads to problems because the townspeople think that River is a witch because she can read minds, and it's really not explained how she can read minds, it's just, oh, she's a mind reader now. Now, this is an obvious reference to medieval Europe and even the early colonial American days with the Salem witch trials. How many people died in the name of insert religion here? It's really unknown, but it's estimated to be in the hundreds of millions in terms of war or just the act of hanging or burning witches. And keep in mind, this is in pre-Enlightenment Europe. Now, we know for a fact that 19 women died in the late 17th century Massachusetts as a result of the Salem witch trials that was started by a group of teenage girls who admitted a decade after that pandemic that they basically just made the whole thing up. This episode also brings up questions about Shepard. When the Serenity pulls up to the Alliance ship to seek medical attention, they're told no. Then Shepard pulls out his ID card and the Alliance patches him up and sends him along their merry way, no fuss, no muss. So what makes Shepard that special? This isn't really answered in this episode, and I don't remember if it gets answered later on. We shall see if that time ever comes. Now, this episode ends with the Serenity crew going back for Simon and River, basically threatening to shoot anyone who stood in their way, that the townspeople are burning River at the stake, along with Simon with, oh, this is God's plan, and then Jane's up in the ship with a big-ass gun, and it's like, well, you should probably be more concerned with the man with the big gun. What's his will? Well, his will is, I want to kill any motherfucker that stands in my way. Now, this ends with a supper at the table with the entire crew. It's not really a last supper, in case if anyone is wondering, and that's the end of the episode. Now, this was an okay episode. It's definitely better than Bushwhacked. This was the episode that showed a job go wrong. This forced the Serenity crew to make the sacrifice of leaving River and Simon to basically just figure it out for themselves. You're not going to risk another man's life who's in critical condition already to go out and search for 2 missing people that may have gotten themselves kidnapped. Now, that's what this episode accomplished. It showed Malcolm's ability to be able to make a tough decision right on the spot. Now, he does ultimately go back for River and Simon, sure, but if he needed to do that again for whatever reason, he would not hesitate, and maybe he won't go back for him if it meant that more crew members would die finding those two who were potentially acting stupid and got themselves kidnapped. Now, this is going to do it for this episode of our Firefly Retrospective. Come back next time when we cover the next episode, Our Mrs. Reynolds.